So now is a good time to talk about Shadow for a bit. But I'm solely focusing on his gameplay at the moment. While I've sprinkled bits and pieces of the stories for Sonic and Silver here and there, I feel that Shadow's story should be given its own section for analysis. It's that special. Anyways, as far as Shadow's gameplay goes, it sucks. Okay, moving forward. Alright, maybe you want me to go into more detail than that. I'd say the best way to approach Shadow when making him playable is to have him control similarly to Sonic, but also allow him to use his Chaos abilities, and not have him just be a Sonic clone, like in most other games. Conceptually speaking, 06 had the best approach for handling Shadow, but in execution, the results are not fun. Shadow's homing attack hits harder from a further distance, and can be followed up with a flurry of punches and kicks that grinds down enemies, but it looks silly and unpolished with the way enemies don't even react until they're dead, and it feels too slow, making his fighting feel more sluggish when continuously homing attacking enemies as Sonic. Base form Chaos Spears are kinda useless. They only stun enemies, which you would think might help with crowd control, but it doesn't. It's really useless in most situations. The swipe kick, when used standing still, has greater offensive properties, but outside of the first Mephiles fight, I'm hard-pressed to find other situations where I can use it effectively. So Shadow in base form is basically just a more mid version of Sonic. That said, Chaos Boost turns things up a bit. Form 1 is a slight upgrade, but Form 2 and especially Form 3 are, well, they're better at least. Shadow hits harder, and his homing attack actually has him teleporting towards the enemies. You can even tear through crowds of smaller enemies, and the Chaos Sphere actually does some damage. Chaos Boost does help the combat somewhat, but it's still sluggish, slow, and very repetitive. Sonic's combat was kinda but at least his combat options were better. And again, Shadow's levels have way more enemies, so you're gonna be doing this a lot. It gets old. His levels certainly do attempt to mix things up. Some of his platforming can be enjoyable, like in the third section of Kingdom Valley or the second section of Dusty Desert. Some levels have objective-oriented goals like destroying all the searchlights in White Acropolis or damaging Eggman's train in Radical Train. I, for the most part, hated this in Shadow's game, but here at least it works, because the level design and the objectives actually go together like bread and butter. Though the only one of these I actually had fun with was the train mission. Wave Ocean has a section entirely unique to Shadow, which would be cool if it was fun, but it's just a flat, bland area with enemy spam and a confusing objective that'll trip up a first-time player. You're supposed to hit a switch which opens up a gate you're supposed to go through. None of this is ever laid out to you. It's easy to find the switch, but you're not clued into where you need to go afterwards. But you are told that those enemies must be guarding the switch. Yeah, like I couldn't tell. Thank you for giving me such important information. The gate is on an obscure side of the map and isn't properly telegraphed, so you're going to be aimlessly dicking around. It's level design 101 that the path to the goal must be clear to the player. It doesn't help that there is a pathway on the docks that doesn't serve as an alternate path to the goal, nor does it lead you to optional goodies, but rather it leads you to a platform where you get to fight more enemies. Who thought this was a good idea? Like, honestly, who? Did a fucking monkey design this? Oh look, a vehicle. Oh brother. Returning from Shadow the Hedgehog, or vehicles Shadow can use. First off, there's the buggy. Its firepower packs a punch, but it can't run over enemies, which is lame, and it has the issue of toppling over a bit too easily. At least riding it down the snowboarding section of Crisis City is a bit fun, but also in Crisis City, a buggy is placed in an area that leads to a dead end, which seems like an oversight. The hovercraft is basically the same as the buggy, except it has a machine gun instead of missiles, and you're also riding over instant death water and quicksand. So if it's destroyed, your ass is drowning straight into hell. Just like with the buggy, it has physics-related problems. So this is likely to happen. Shadow's Dusty Desert serves as an example of this, with inclines that have the possibility of ruining your day, but that doesn't even come close to the bullshit in Shadow's Kingdom Valley. There are these giant stone pillars that are as fragile as Zem92's ego.
This person can go, for all intents and purposes, get hit by a bus.
If you shoot them even a little bit, they will crumble into pieces, and likely you'll be close enough for the rubble to fall on you and kill you. Actually, you don't even have to shoot them. Sometimes they just crumble on their own. And it's stupid! This is never telegraphed to you, nor is it ever apparent how far of a reach the rebel has on you, and unless you have the camera awkwardly positioned upward, you likely won't see it coming, so it comes off as cheap and frustrating. What's even worse is that this is the first time you'll use the hovercraft, and you're conditioned to want to shoot. Yet, with these pillars in the line of fire, you're basically punished for even shooting. Pure bass-ackwards design, and it's even worse with the horrible physics and control of the hovercraft. The motorcycle should be agile and smooth, but instead it's wobbly and wonky as hell. Though using the motorcycle to chase and shoot down Eggman's train and Radical Train is a pretty fun set piece. It's still jank though. Also, its placement in Aquatic Base makes no sense, both in terms of lore and level design. Then you have the Hang Glider. On one hand, it's fun to let loose and shoot up a bunch of enemies. On the other hand... just look at this shit! Literally, with 2 out of the 3 hang glider segments, you don't even need to perform any player input. This is pathetic! Though, at least they don't overstay their welcome. But these vehicles just suck! At least I can say that these two have at least 2 things in common. Those being that they both used hang gliders at some point, and they both have some sort of association with Ryoko Matoi. With Shadow's Amigo characters, first you have Rouge, and she plays similarly to how she was in SA2. So in other words, she plays like Knuckles. Though instead of kicking like she did in SA2, here she throws bombs. She's always stationary when attacking, so her combat is cumbersome as hell. She also has that same issue that Knuckles has with getting stuck on walls. Just like Knuckles, she isn't very good. At most, she's well incorporated into the level design for the most part. Omega is okay. He actually controls really well and is faster than Sonic? Why? Anyways, his attacks consist of a lock-on charge shot and a regular blast, and they're both good to use. He is fun as a powerhouse character with the limited amount of times you can control him, but he lacks a lot of the destructive capabilities that he had in Heroes, so he's kind of inferior. That and he's also kind of undercooked, though I'd be completely remiss if I didn't mention his major exploit revolving around his hover move. Continuously tapping the jump button delays his descent, keeping him in the air significantly longer. This can be exploited to skip an entire chunk of Shadow's Wave Ocean. And yeah, I definitely took advantage of this. But yeah, that's basically everything regarding Shadow's gameplay. And yep, it's bad. Though it is carried by a good story. But looking at the gameplay specifically, I don't know if Shadow or Silver had it worse. Both campaigns suffer from critical flaws, like repetition and a general lack of polish, though Shadow has the annoyance of occasional cheap design. And with that, we have talked about every single playable character. I do like how this game tries to be the logical evolution of what 3D Sonic was up to that point, basically being the closest thing we have to Sonic Adventure 3. Though the whole Crash 4 situation leads me to say that this doesn't cancel out the possibility of a real Sonic Adventure 3, or a Sonic Adventure 4 if you will. But putting all that aside, by doing this, Sonic 06 lends itself to its own doom. Its Achilles heel is the amount of characters it tries to shove into one game. So much time is put into creating so many playstyles that there isn't enough time to make them fun or polished. Only 3 out of the 9 characters are decent, and even those ones have issues. Now with a complete dev team and a more reasonable deadline, then maybe this could have been pulled off. But because of the dev team being cut in half, the main director leaving, and the rushed development, this had a snowball's chance in hell of working. I think that they only really should have focused on the main three, Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. More time should have been put into making their playstyles fun and exciting. Sonic should be exhilarating, Shadow should be powerful, and Silver should be liberating. Instead, all three of them fall short of their potential, though Sonic is, at the very least, decent. The other two, however, are just either broken, boring, or both. And then the Amigo characters, with the exception of Blaze and maybe Omega, are just bad. With its playable characters, Sonic 06 is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It's the Icarus that flew too close to the sun. That said, we still have a lot left to talk about with gameplay. We still have the remaining levels, bosses, and other stuff to cover. So, returning to where we were in Sonic's campaign, the gang managed to find the second Chaos Emerald, but then this happens.
Don't touch it!
Chaos? Meet your younger sibling, Iblis. Iblis has three forms you end up fighting, with the first and third being fought by Silver, and the second being fought by Sonic and Shadow. The first fight that's at the beginning of Silver's campaign is crap. It's mostly just waiting for there to be available ammunition to throw at him, while also dodging his really slow attacks. Again, because of the size and scale of the fight, it can be exciting from a spectacle standpoint, but it can also feel like a drag with how much waiting you have to do. You're either waiting for objects to throw at him, or waiting for him to finish his slow-moving attacks. The Phase 3 Iblis fight is much more involved. The attacks here are more interesting, and you also need to defeat him fast enough before he destroys the foothold you're on, which certainly adds more urgency to the fight. I'd say I like this battle, except it's still held back by Silver's janky means of attack, but Iblis Phase 2 is easily the worst. It's a war of attrition, complete with bad camera work and constant dead air, whether you're waiting for easily to avoid attacks, or for stalactites to drop allowing you to hit the glowing rocks. You can simply damage boost your way to the glowing rocks, making the fight go by way faster, but that still exemplifies how much of a nothing boss this is. This boss would have worked much better as a platforming challenge where you need to make your way to the glowing rocks while Iblis throws projectile attacks at you. You'd have your usual fireball attacks, but he would also make stalactites fall on you and splash a wave of magma at you that would force you to take cover. When you reach one of the glowing rocks, Iblis begins to lunge at you, and you'd have to hit the rock as quickly as possible before they get to you. Iblis is stunned, you attack them, and the fight repeats 3 more times, with it getting more intense each round. And oh, look at me, making fixes for a boss that'll never get fixed! Oh well, these are good concepts at least.
Hey, what's wrong? Is that size just for show?
That's what she said.
With Iblis out of the way, our heroes induce chaos control. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles take the portal back to their point in time, and Shadow and Rouge are about to follow suit until they notice a particular figure. The Mephiles fights are based around power dynamics, with him initially having the higher ground, and you needing to build up Shadow's Chaos Gauge to do any damage. When you're in Chaos Boost mode, you have the upper hand. An interesting concept, and it does remind me of how the Ghosts in Pac-Man function, though only on the instance of it being based around power play, yet it could have been taken further than it was. In the phase of the fight where you're building up your Chaos energy, Mephiles could have thrown more interesting attacks your way, while also having him summon different minions with unique abilities to make the fight more overwhelming. So when you do build up enough energy, the pendulum shift feels more apparent and rewarding. Yet, as the fight is, all he does in the initial phase is just having these easy to counter minions attempt to dogpile you. Yeah, that's really it. It's sort of underwhelming. But the second phase where you fight him as Omega is decent. The second Mephiles fight had the opportunity to build off of this, and to some extent it does by having minions that are larger and taking more time to defeat, but this really isn't enough. It's still shallow. Though with the part of the fight where you are in Chaos Boost form, Mephiles actually does have more aggressive attacks, and it actually feels like a full-on fight between the two. It stands as one of the better boss battles in 06, and again, the story gives it more of an impact, but more on that later. For now, let's return to the present with Sonic. Oh, and also, this thing that Rouge says during the boss fight...
Hey, that doesn't look good.
Yeah, I bet this was the thought process of the developers when they were looking at those review scores. Or, more likely, this is what they thought when they saw how the game was turning out during development. Anyways...
Looks like we made it back in one piece.
Fun fact, this line is actually a reference to Dan Green's work on One Piece. Okay, jokes aside, we now need to get the bounce attack and use it to get to the next level. One thing I like about Sonic's campaign is that anytime you get a new ability, the next level you go to has good usage of that ability. You get the Lightspeed Dash before Wave Ocean, and Wave Ocean has paths that use the Lightspeed Dash. Dusty Desert introduces big enemies that you can use the anti-gravity on, and the bounce attack comes in handy in Radical Train when it comes to dealing with the conveyor belts and getting through the combat faster. It gives that nice feeling that the level design is evolving alongside the character you're controlling. Granted, there are games that do this better, but I digest and agree to digress. So, Radical Train. This level is easily in my top 5 for the game. The whole concept where you have to protect this train from getting destroyed is really well implemented and manages to flow well with the pace. I love the theme the level goes for, and it does a good job applying to that theme with the level design. The platforming revolving around wooded surfaces and conveyor belts were fun, though I feel they could have been taken further, but they're still nice and they do complement the level's identity. Same thing with the grimy railroad aesthetic, which I very much like. Rail grinding is also well implemented. The shortcuts are fun and it's a nicely flowing level, though the Mog Speed section has jumps that are hard to calculate, thanks in no part to the lack of aerial control. Basically an issue with every Mog Speed section. At least when you get past that, the part where you're chasing the train is fun and exhilarating. A really good level, aside from some blemishes. More platformers should have levels that take place in rail transports. Oh hi Spark the Electric Jester 2! Sonic saves Elise, but then Sonic's attacked by Silver, and then Eggman captures Elise. Again. It feels like we're going around in circles. As Silver's about to kill Sonic, Shadow jumps in to save Sonic and confronts Silver. It should be noted that this is the only scene before the final story where all three Hedgehogs are together, so that's neat. This is a nice scene only because we get to see Shadow being cool as hell. We'll save the confrontation between Shadow and Silver for later. For now, we'll continue following Sonic. With Elise being sick of being such a poorly written character, she attempts to end her suffering, but Sonic saves her in time, and Eggman goes, "You know what? Fuck you! Here's an orange box!" Fun fact, the Egg Genesis is called the Egg Mega Drive in the European release. Okay, so jokes aside, the Egg Genesis, like a lot of other bosses in this game, is yet another fight with a nice sense of size and scale, but is overall undercooked. It's one of those fights where the boss will do an attack, then leave themselves open for you to attack them. The attacks, however, aren't challenging or interesting enough to justify the structure. Also, there are 2 ways to damage the Egg Genesis, and one of them barely even works, so why bother? I think this fight would have been much better if it was like the Mega Leg fight in Super Mario Galaxy. You know, a Shadow of the Colossus-styled boss, where you try to stay on top of it, and destroy all its weak points while it tries to knock you off. Well, Meta's Hell boss aside, we are then treated to this cutscene.
I owe you a lot, Sonic.
Tropical Jungle is up next. It's the second and last Sonic and Elise level, and just like Dusty Desert, I find it to be delightful in spite of the gimmick. The first half may be a bit too much on the automated side of things, but the reaction-based design here is still solid, with my favorite part being the short rail grinding gauntlet, where the stage mixes up jumping from vines, and homing attack chains to reach rail to rail, to which it then climaxes into this cute little moment between Sonic and Elise, where they think they're about to hit the water, but are then strung up into the air. It's an exciting set piece and one of the few good moments between Sonic and Elise. Even if there is too much automation, the scripted bits are still staggering. I also love the level's theme, even if it has been done before in the series. I don't know, I guess I'm a sucker for levels that take place on treetops. The second half is where the level is at its best, with so many branching pathways, with the top paths being really fun to take, though this level might be frustrating if you don't know what you're doing, and because of this, some parts might come off as cheap, so it may deduct points for that, but if you do know what you're doing, it's quite enjoyable, with the many different ways to get to the goal. It even has the best usage of Elise's shield mechanic. In fact, the whole stage puts the Elise carrying gimmick to good use, with the set piece mentioned earlier, and level design in the second act. Pretty good level it is overall. That is if we're talking about Sonic's version of the level. The version of the stage in the other two campaigns is completely different, as that one is a maze. It is a frustrating nightmare to traverse as Silver, and a complete joke as Rouge, since you can basically glide over almost everything. There's no balance, but one thing is for sure, I dig the overall aesthetics of Tropical Jungle, and you know how I said Flamecore might have my favorite aesthetic? Yeah, this one might actually rival it. In the cutscene following the level, we see Sonic bringing Elise to a grassy field, while pretty music plays, with not so subtle romantic undertones. Now it really feels like we're going around in circles. Well, I don't have much to say about this scene, other than it's more cheesy forced romance that's bad. In the next scene, we see Eggman threatening to eviscerate Soliana unless Elise surrenders herself. Elise decides that for the good of her own people, she goes aboard the egg carrier, thus the final time she gets captured, making it a whopping 5 times she gets captured. How can one character be so useless? And yes, just like the previous 2 acts, this third and final act of Sonic's story is all about saving Elise. Sonic's campaign has the worst narrative of all 3 of the main hedgehogs. One of the reasons as to why is repetition, but I'll elaborate more later.
Did your parents ever disclose to you anything about Solaris? Solaris's secrets are in his eternal flames. His power can change time.
Wow! Eggman giving exposition on Solaris for the second time? Yeah, we really are going around in circles. And now we are controlling Tails? Okay then. We control Tails as we need to find Sonic, and we do that by going through Wave Ocean? Again? Okay, this is obviously padding, and it's not even justified well enough. It's not like you beat the level and it's followed up with a cutscene where Tails runs up to Sonic chilling in Wave Ocean and telling him what's going on. Nope, you just beat the level and you're instantly plopped back into the hub world as Sonic. There's no story justification for this. Now, if this was a brand new level, it wouldn't be so bad. But it's literally the same level we've already been to in this campaign. This really could have been removed, and nothing of any purpose would be lost. All this does is reinforce how awkward it is to play as Tails. Man, one minute I'm saying nice things about this game, and then the next minute I'm cursing its name! Oh, and also, this happened. Good stuff, you know. Good game. Before we get into the game's best level, we have a final batch of side stuff to talk about. One of those things are the hub worlds. Going back to Sonic Adventure, that game had pretty damn great hub worlds. There were many charming locations, memorable landmarks, interesting NPCs, and they were easy to go around. Seriously, they really did a decent job of pointing you in the right direction, even if they went kind of overboard in some ways. With the fun controls, they were fun to traverse, but you know what my favorite part of the hub worlds were? Well, you might think this is silly, but it was the entrances to the levels. they contextualized them and had them make sense. They were interconnected so well that the actual levels felt like extensions of the hub world, and that's very neat to me. No other Sonic game with hub worlds had ever done that. 06 in particular instead had you touch a stone portal to get to the level. And that's not as cool, but it's fine, you know. At least the stone portals fit with the fantasy aesthetic of Soliana. It does make the levels in hub world feel more disconnected, however, but they do have the environment surrounding the portal fit in with the level's theming, so there's that. But the main problem with the hub worlds is that they're not very good, let alone fun. Okay, so admittedly I found the Soliana town to be charming, but none of these hub worlds compared to the likes of Sonic Adventure 1's hub worlds. There was no distinct design. It's either only the same building copy and pasted, or a flat open field of nothing. But the worst problem with the hub worlds is that sometimes the game does a poor job of guiding you in the right direction. So on your first playthrough, you could easily find yourself meandering around trying to locate your next objective, though I will admit I found amusement in the NPCs. Sonic Team knew how weird it was to have Sonic interacting with hyper-realistic humans, so they played into that by having the humans say the most absurd shit. I'd be hard-pressed not to mention Sonic Man, a guy who's such a big Sonic fan that he acts like him so much to a point to where he's convinced that he is the real Sonic. You gotta love the guy. Let's talk about the town missions. Little challenges you can do to earn currency, and for 100% completion if you hate yourself enough. A lot of these have you either fighting a group of enemies, collecting rings, jumping through rings, racing someone, reuniting a dog with their owner, fighting more. Alright, okay, you know, I'm pretty sure you get the whole gist of it. Yeah, these are bland. The crippling issue with them are those damn loading screens you're gonna have to deal with. Outside of the town missions, getting a rank above E in the main levels earns you some currency, with the highest rank S netting you 1,000 rings. Oh yeah, the ranking system. I haven't talked about that. Even though it's a significant element in level-based 3D Sonic games that ties every core gameplay element together, I was gonna talk about it in the SA2 review, but I scrapped that segment because the video was running a bit too long. Quite ironic considering the current circumstances. But yes, getting a rank better than your previous run of the level was a sign of improvement, and getting an S rank, or an A rank with the game's preceding Sonic Rush, showed that you mastered the level. It's a nice mechanic to add, and especially since it implores players to do more in a level than speed past everything, as the rings you collect and the amount of enemies you defeat play into the overall score, along with the time in which you take to beat the level. It's even better when the game has incentives, like in the adventure games, where getting the highest ranks rewarded you with emblems that unlock alternate skins, the Game Gear titles, and or a bonus level. Or in the case of 06, you're rewarded with currency. In this instance, even an A or B rank is sustainable, as you still get a decent amount of money. But yeah, with the town missions, I only ever bothered with the ones for Sonic's campaign. With Shadow and Silver, all their necessary abilities are easily obtainable with money you get from the main levels. There aren't any cool, optional upgrades you'd want to get for them, so your only incentivization to do their town missions is 100% completion. And that's a merry-go-round in hell that I don't want to take. Sonic, on the other hand, has the optional and oh-so-fun gems. These different colored gemstones that give Sonic additional abilities, such as dashing, slowing down time, performing a breakdance tornado that hits nearby enemies, shrinking for some reason, and having an infinite amount of jumps, throwing a stone that flings you to any area it lands, an alternate homing attack that kills enemies in one hit, and an electric shield. There was also going to be a rainbow gem that would have allowed the player to turn into Super Sonic during the main levels, but that got scrapped, though it can be put back into the game through hacks. However, the animation is the only thing you'll get out of it. This is fun. It expands Sonic's moveset without having to come up with different button combinations, and the abilities could present different ways to go about the levels. In theory, that is. But I have to mention how broken they are. And I don't mean broken as in balancing. I mean broken as in the developers literally forgot to program the fucking energy meter. That's right. You have unlimited usage of them. You have dash like a maniac, soar like an eagle, fling yourself to your heart's content. The full, unadulterated power of the gems are in your hands for vast use. Go forth and go get him, you gemstone crusader! But yeah, there's also a lack of polish with some of the gem abilities. In general, the purple, light blue, red, and, to some extent, blue gems are the most useful, though the blue gem is the most tricky given the whole bumping into walls issue. The green gem's tornado kick is nice for combat variety, but it's too slow and sluggish for my liking. The white gem's homing attack taking out enemies in one hit is pretty cool, and it's neat how it uses unused homing attack recoil animations, but apparently it doesn't even work. So much for that, I suppose. And the yellow gem, well, it's good for getting rings, like
Give me a big, fat break!
But yeah, the gems are fun and do give me a good reason to do the town missions. And our final bit of side content are the Soliana medals. They're littered throughout the hub world, and there are also 8 of them in each of the main levels. There are bonus medals to get through beating the main levels and bosses, as well as other bonus medals you'd get from S ranks. So medals are like this game's equivalent of the emblems of yesteryear. They're fun to nab, but what do? Do they unlock skins? Nope. How about older 8-bit and 16-bit game? Nope. Do they unlock a secret? Nope. Do they even? Nope. Okay, so what do?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Yep. You gotta be
Stupid!
to think they're worth a damn. Oh, these Soliana medals in there. They're nothingness. They don't do anything. The Soliana medals, they don't do anything. That's funny. All that trouble you have to go through to get them all, and they do nothing. All those collectibles that just do nothing. They do nothing. They do literally nothing. They do nothing. Fuck! The road to Kingdom Valley will test your patience, as before you have access to the level, you have to do 3 different town missions. The first one is a guessing game, where there are many sets of 3 portals, and you have to jump in the right ones. Taking the wrong portal sends you back to the beginning. It's annoying. The second one is a combat challenge where you have no rings. It's annoying. The third and final one is a simple choice between whether or not your true love is Elise or Amy, and thankfully this one is short and painless, but the implications aren't any less awkward. But obviously the worst part about this entourage of filler are those damn loading screens. In this case, you'll have to go through 13 of them. Hell, you may have to go through more if you fail one of them. The 3 trials in Sonic's campaign are certainly a negative talking point for many, but what if I told you? Silver has the same thing, but even worse. Not only does he also have to do 3 trials, 2 of them being repetitive combat and 1 annoying guessing game, but he also has to do a fucking escort mission. You know, everyone's favorite type of mission. Have fun going at a snail's pace, protecting some slow-as-hell woman, while dealing with some of the most obtuse combat mechanics seen on this side of Dumbass Land. You know, Silver, wouldn't it have been simpler to just carry her to the goal with your psychokinesis? But no, it gets even better. Autosaving was a thing since Sonic 3 on the Genesis, and was carried into every Sonic game that came after. Except for this one. How they were able to fuck up saving is a mystery to me. Granted, the game does give you the option to save after any main level or boss fight is completed. For town missions though, it doesn't automatically give you the option, so you have to manually save. Unfortunately, going into Silver's Kingdom Valley during my first playthrough of this story, I didn't bother to save before going in, and I ended up biting the dust, getting a game over. And guess what? Because I didn't save, I had to redo up to 30 minutes of filler! I had to redo the fucking escort mission. I had to retake those 3 stupid-ass trials. I had to sit through all those fucking loading screens again. It was easily one of the most painful and agonizing experiences I had with this game. Granted, this is something you can easily avoid by saving before going into level, but the fact that this even happened at all is still ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is, the player having to sit through 20 to 30 minutes of unfun, purposeless filler is already a bad thing as is. Alright, anyways. Kingdom Valley. For Shadow, it has its highlights, but also some bad design that bogs it down. For Silver, it's one of his better levels, with its greater emphasis on platforming, but he's still chronically unfun to play as, and so it's still a drag. But in terms of Sonic's gameplay, well, it's probably the best level in the game. It's easy to tell because of how much work must have been put into it, given its prominence in all those showcases and old beta screenshots. The first section is incredibly wide open, with many differing pathways, and they're fun to take, especially with the higher paths having the right amount of difficulty to feel like an exhilarating challenge. Later sections are more linear, but make good use of the mechanics like lightspeed dashes, the wind rails, those bungee ropes you balance off of, not to mention those fun little moments where you break through the stained windows or run down the crumbling staircase, as well as those moments where the mechs chase you while you're grinding on the wind rail. Not to mention this bit at the beginning where you homing attack this enemy into the bridge, causing it to collapse so you can use it as a platform. There's just a lot of good environmental interaction. There's just a lot of fun spectacle in this level. Seeing Sonic dash through an abandoned Gothic castle is just appealing to me. But man, that Mog Speed section at the end is incredible! Yeah, I have already made note of the problems with the Mog Speed sections, but in this instance, I just don't care. This one is just really fun, and really cool to look at, especially with this crossing of the Red Sea aesthetic. Those parts where Sonic is just running on the waterfall is just so awe-inspiring. Though if there was one thing I didn't like about this level, it's definitely the bits where you have to play as Silver. Even then, it's still not that bad, and goes by quickly. And yes, there's at least 1 or 2 moments where you'll switch to the main character of another campaign for a short section. And it's weird, but it's played into the narrative well enough, so I'm fine with it. But yeah, Kingdom Valley is just a really good level. Unfortunately, it's rendered useless in the story. The A-carrier begins to malfunction, leading to it eventually crashing, killing both Eggman and Elise. Sonic, Silver, and Blaze catch up to the A-carrier, only to witness this happen, and so hope seems lost. Until they remember that they have access to broken time travel abilities that have no limit, can be used at any time, and completely eliminates any sorts of stakes or tensions by giving the characters a literal undo button. And it also creates other questions, like why aren't the heroes taking advantage of this mechanic to have the upper hand over the villain, and all these problems are just reminders that they shot this screenplay out the door without giving it the second draft that it desperately needed! Sonic goes back into the point before Eggman and Elise boarded onto the A-carrier. Would have been smarter to go back even further before he kidnapped her again, and simply just kick his ass for good, but let's not try and put logic into a narrative that doesn't care to have any. So you hit 3 bells, and the next and final level is unlocked. Also, have I mentioned that the camera in this game is ass? As we desperately race against time to reach the A-carrier before it lifts off, we are at Sonic's final level, Aquatic Base. I used to write this off as a bland, repetitive mess of enemy spam, but as I continue to write this, I do see it's more than that. It takes a lot of what you've experienced beforehand and pretty much throws it all in one final gauntlet of endurance. You get instances of reflex-based design, you have more difficult enemy arrangements, they spice things up with the previously mentioned environmental mechanics, Tails and Knuckles get their time in the spotlight, there's this cool detail at the end where the alarm starts to go off, probably signifying the A-carrier getting ready to lift off. The environment being this abandoned underwater research facility is damn cool. But oh man, the dramatic and tragic yet hopeful, determined atmosphere that's accentuated by the profound music. Even in the lesser Silver and Shadow versions of the level, the atmosphere is still strong. The level has so much going for it, yet it's also the most combat-focused level. With that in mind, it's especially here where the sluggish and uncomfortable feeling of the combat truly gets its showcase. It just feels slower than it should, and I wish there could have been more of an emphasis on challenging obstacle courses and hazard placement. But I still see what they were going for with it. It's still a climactic stage. I do feel it's worth mentioning that Freedom Planet has a very similar level to Aquatic Base with its thermal base, though Freedom Planet did it significantly better, but that's neither here nor there. Well, we basically covered almost every level the game has to offer. Well, at least mostly from Sonic's perspective. It's safe to say that every level has at least one thing bad about it. Whether it's a bad Mach Speed section, an abysmal snowboarding segment, or just generally unpolished jank. Yet, in spite of the gameplay problems, the game is still carried by consistently solid and intelligent level design. They give the player so much to toy around with, so many different paths, and many different things to interact with. It takes design approaches from previous 3D Sonic games and translates them well here. And with the leap in hardware, you have levels that are more wide open with greater sense of discovery. Okay, so don't get me wrong, it's not perfect by any means. You still have to deal with the lifeless and restrained physics. There's a lack of polish in certain areas. Still though, it cannot be denied how much passion was put into these levels. Just like with the Genesis games, just like with the adventure games, and just like with Heroes, there's this desire to wow the player. Which is something I cannot say the same for with Forces or Sonic 4 Episode 1. Now, does it ever come close to the highs of Adventure, Adventure 2, and Heroes? In some instances, I'd say somewhat, but for the most part, I'd be inclined to say no. But regardless, the levels of Sonic 06 deserve more appreciation than they end up getting. Oh, but I also have to ask, does having this consistently enjoyable level design make up for the game's other issues? Well, there are other things I still need to talk about before answering that question. We are now at the very edge of Sonic's campaign, with the final duel against Eggman as he pilots the Egg Wyvern. And yes, this is yet another instance of Sonic 06 taking inspiration from Sonic Adventure. Case in point, this fight plays out like the Egg Viper battle from that game. All it's missing are those repetitive quotes. And well, on that note...
Get a load of this! Get a load of this!
Yeah, now it's perfect. But yeah, this fight certainly doesn't hold a candle to the Egg Viper, but there still is merit to it, though it does start off with the issue of having long wind-up attacks that are easy to dodge, but as the fight progresses, he continuously breaks down more and more of the platform you're on, reducing the space you have, thus making his offenses pose a viable threat. It actually feels kind of intense. It still needs a lot of polishing though, but it stands as one of the better fights in the game. Also, his defeat animation looks stupid as hell, and I love it. With Eggman defeated, we are treated to one final cutscene where Sonic and Elise share what might be their best moment together. It's admittedly a nice scene.
Aren't you worried?
If you have time to worry, then none, right? Ha